Are you a hobbyist looking to take your crafts to the next level? Well, this might be exactly what you need. This here is the AnyCubic Mono X 3D printer. Today we're going to check it out and see how it is to use, how hard it is to use for beginners especially. I haven't used a resin 3D printer before, I've only used FDM ones. And then at the same time, should you actually go buy one? All that soon to come, but first if you guys could like and subscribe, that'd really help me out as a small creator. I'm trying to make it to 1,000 subscribers. Also, I rebranded the channel and it's called Should I Buy instead of just my name. So if you got an opinion on that, leave it in the comments as well. I don't know if it's a great name, but figured I'd swap it up and make it a little bit more relevant to what we're actually talking about here. All that soon to come though. If you guys could please like and subscribe, that'd be awesome, and let's get into this. Okay, so let's start out with an overview of this thing. First, how does it even work? And for that, we're gonna go check it out in the garage so that the smells don't get in the house because my parents wouldn't like that very much. So let's get out there. Okay, as you can tell, it's a lot later in the day, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you the steps to actually print something and how the process works. So I'm gonna narrate this and then we're gonna cut to B-roll hopefully so you can see what's going on. So we're gonna start by removing this overshield lid. There's actually a sensor in there so you can have it so that it'll automatically pause if you remove the lid. I don't really think it's worth it, but it's a safety feature if you care about it. Then what we're gonna do is we're going to level the bed. So you do that by basically placing a piece of paper on the bed, pressing, loosening all the screws, and then pressing go to zero, press the plate in, and then screw all the screws in. Then you can press zero equal, basically go to zero, and that will zero it. And then you can raise the thing. Then what we're gonna do is we're gonna put the vat in there and we're gonna fill it with some resin. And then after that, all you pretty much have to do is press home and press go on the print file. So I'm gonna go do all that now, run the B-roll, and then we'll cut back to the review. Okay, so now that we know how it works, let's talk about the specs of this actual machine. So on the XY plane, it has an accuracy down to 0.05 millimeters, which is realistically as accurate as you would want to be. I mean, if you're doing high tolerance manufacturing work, it may not be good enough for that. But if you're doing that, hopefully you have more of a budget than $340 for a 3D printer. Next, in the Z direction, so this is the top to bottom, it actually can go down to 0.01 millimeters. So that is incredibly accurate. So if you have a product that has to have dimensions in one axis that's really accurate, it's probably a good idea to make that the Z axis because that's where the most accuracy comes from. As for the biggest size you can build, it actually works out to about 192 by 160 by 245 millimeters. So that is a pretty big build volume. And you can build realistically any sort of part or 3D figurine model you want. And if not, you can just separate it up into multiple parts and combine them. But I will say that if you are printing that big of a part, it is going to take a hot minute because basically the way this works is the speed they can print is down to use of the X and Y axis. It's perfectly fine. It won't actually increase print times at all because just different parts of the screen are turning on. But as it goes up, each one of those 0.01 millimeter layers stacks up and you can start taking a long time to print. I will say though, it does it automatically so you can just let it run overnight, not a huge deal. But if you're trying to do those rapid prototypes, sometimes for really thin parts, I can get them down to literally this was extremely flat because I was basically just building a flat plane, but it was literally running in 8 minutes and it was done with the part, which is just crazy, especially compared to an FDM printer, which even for that would be an hour or so. So huge difference, but keep that in mind when you're building. Now that we went over the basics, let's get into how the setup actually works. So I actually have a video of this, so I'm gonna play that over this, but basically it took about 30 minutes. You just install, everything comes pretty much pre-assembled. The only thing you have to do is assemble the build plate and pretty much install it. And then you gotta go level the bed. So setting it up and leveling the bed, that was a huge issue on my FDM 3D printer because it took forever and it was very finicky. I've had way less issues with bed leveling on this type of 3D printer. I don't know if that's just because it's new and over time tolerances will build up and it will not be as accurate anymore. But from my experience so far, it's been amazing to use and doesn't really actually take that long to level. One thing I would recommend doing is after you build it, it comes with an included 3D print file, and I think that you definitely should run that. It's just like this floating cube, but you know what? It looks pretty cool and it'll make sure if you have any issues, it's the printer's issue and not just you sliced the file wrong when you uploaded it, which gets us into how actually it is to use day to day. So compared to, the only thing I have to reference is my Creality Ender 3 3D printer. And I actually had a great experience with that overall. Just eventually the like something clogged, and it's just, you have to go clean it out with like acetone and stuff like that. Incredibly tedious process. You have all sorts of nozzle issues. Also, the belts can wear over time and they become looser, and then you just have to adjust those, and it's basically a very tedious process. This, on the other hand, they only has like one moving part, and it's just way easier to set up and use day to day. There's so much less work. Like that one, I would have, or like the other one, I would have to level the bed almost every single time, and it was just very issue. You had to put glue on the bed to get it to actually like stick. This doesn't have that issue at all. The other cool thing about this type of printer instead of the other one is, because the build layers are so small, the actual accuracy and like what you see on the side of the print, you don't see a bunch of levels. You can if you like use it, put in the light correctly and stuff like that. But realistically, unless you're doing that, most models, especially if they have very organic shapes, are going to be very hard to tell the leveling. And it looks actually, I think it looks pretty well cast. So if you were trying to get like models for like creation of something like that, or you're trying to like 3D prototype parts, very cool work, and does a very good job with it. So after you build the parts, you have to take them off and you have to clean them off. I just have a bucket of isopropyl alcohol. I'm sure that there's a better way to do it, but that seems to clean off the parts mostly and get all the extra stuff off. So if you just dump it in isopropyl alcohol for a few seconds, and then you just wipe it off with like a paper towel, it should be good to go. You do have to then go and UV cure those parts. So that, I've just been doing it by leaving them in the sun. There is a special like washing / like UV curing thing AnyCubic makes, and I might do that over at some point, because it does tend to like take a while. And as well, it depends on the amount of UV light, but I know their white filament tends to turn yellow if you leave it in the sun too long, which makes sense, but it's not white, so I don't know why they brand it as white. So keep that in mind. It does tend to like go away if you like leave it inside for a while. I don't know entirely how it works. That's just the experience I've had using it. So I've used white and gray, and both of those colors, I mean, they like structurally they work perfectly. It's just really weird when you expect it to be like bright white, and then like it is bright white in the bottle, and when you take it off it's bright white, but after you leave it in the sun for a few hours, it kind of turns yellow. So now let's get on to the biggest issue I've had with this thing, and that is the first layer has what is essentially a wrap, if you know what that is, around the bottom. So basically there's like the bottom edge is like bigger than all the other edges. So on the bottom, it like goes, like if you draw it like a vertical face, it'll go like this and swoop out at the bottom. So that is very annoying, especially when you're trying to make interlocking parts. There is ways to defeat this, such as either hovering the part and then having it like stand on what is essentially like a truss of supports. I tried doing that. I didn't have a ton of success with their slicer, which I'll get into a little bit later. But that's one of the options, and the other option is to just reduce the first layer built, like not burn time, but like light time, so that it like doesn't have as much time to like cure that much plastic to like make it excessive. So I tried doing that. I did have better results with that, but keep in mind, you're gonna have to definitely be finicky with it if you're trying to get the first layer to be that accurate. If you're just trying to build a model and it's got a circular base and it's just like whatever, you don't care, then perfectly fine. But if you're trying to make parts that like interlock with each other, definitely can be a struggle. Been messing with it a bunch. It's very annoying. So that is an issue. I will say that's the only real issue I've had with this thing though. It is definitely reliable. I did say one other thing. I guess I'm probably gonna get into this later. But they didn't ship it with the newest firmware, and then their website is kind of sketchy and uses a Google Drive Dropbox link to update the software. So I don't know why they don't host that locally, but yeah, that's just kind of sus, especially because Google Drive's like throwing up warnings being like, we can't verify this isn't security, or like this is secure, and yeah, they just are like, yeah, that's fine. So something they could improve on there. But other than that, the actual day-to-day use is really effective, like fast. It's fast, it's useful, and yeah, that's pretty much all I gotta say on that. So now getting into more of the nitpicky things. Their app, I couldn't get it to work. I did connect this to the Wi-Fi network, which you have to do using some weird YouTube tutorial because it's not on their website or the manual as far as I can find. But you basically have to set the Wi-Fi and password in like a text file, and then you have to run that text file as if it's like a printer file, and then it'll take that and then connect to your network. But then when I tried to enter the ID of this machine into the app, it's just like, nah, that's not a valid ID. And I'm like, well, damn, that feels bad because that's the ID it gave me. So that's a little bit of an issue, and that could be either a user error, which I couldn't figure out how to do it, but I spent like a good hour trying to figure it out and then realized I don't care about having the active status of my prints that much. Or could just be that the software is a bit glitchy. I will say though that the touchscreen is very easy to use, and it's like very clear. There's not a ton of options there, but all of the options you would need appear to be there. Another thing that I wanted to point out was they include masks and filters. The mask is for like the smell of it because it's technically kind of toxic. The mask is just a COVID mask and you can still smell it easily. So I don't really think that did anything. That might just be a regulation thing that they have to put it in there, but that is essentially doing nothing. So I would use it in a well-ventilated space. Secondly, they include filters and they won't connect to the actual model. So then they'll end up just like floating around in the like vat of resin. So you probably don't want that because then they can get like attached into the prints later on if it like gets moved around depending on how the liquid flows. So they include filters, but they're not reusable at all. So I like made my own out of the filter they have. So I mean, I literally just took the like filter part out of the paper one and then strapped it to the end of the funnel with some electrical tape. Works perfectly fine and is pretty reusable. So yeah, recommend doing that. Oh, and then their website lists that this uses SD cards, and it just doesn't use SD cards. It comes with a flash drive in the box. Flash drive works perfectly fine. I think it's like 4 gigs or so. Definitely as big as you'd need for any print models. But yeah, that's just not an SD card. So they should probably fix that at some point. I guess it's time to get into the conclusion. So I think that this is a very cool 3D printer. It can print whatever you need, as big as you really realistically want it. And it seems to be pretty accurate. There are some issues with like overhangs and stuff. Like you have to do supports, and the support like fixtures of the slicer aren't the best. I actually ended up using this thing called Shitubox, or I think that's how you pronounce it. So you probably want to check that out. Their software is okay though. But yeah, no, I think if you want to get a 3D printer and a resin one, I think for like $330 on their website, I would definitely recommend their website because it's cheaper than Amazon. But yeah, if you want to like get into 3D printing and use a resin 3D printer, I think this would be a awesome toy to play around with and definitely make anything that you want to build a little bit easier, as long as you know how to like 3D model and stuff. Or you can just rip off designs off the internet. There's lots of free websites to do it. So if you just want to print some cool things, definitely recommend it. But yeah, that's all I have for today. So if you guys could like to subscribe, that would really help me out as a small creator. Let me know what you think about the rebranding to Should I Buy? And yeah, that's pretty much all I have for today. So thank you so much for watching, and see you.